So, I wanted to talk to you about 4 words today, and these 4 words are very commonly brought up in union contracts and fire department policy and administrative policy all over the country. If it says you can't use marijuana, well, this isn't from marijuana. It's completely legal to use. If it says you can't use hemp, then you can't use it because hemp is what we make CBD from. I'm not a lawyer, and any policy that you want to see changed or need legal counsel on, you should seek a lawyer for. This isn't legal advice, so that's my disclaimer. However, I have worked with a lot of unions and fire departments lately talking about, the legality, the verbiage, the language of whether firefighters can or cannot use hemp or CBD products, based on the language that's in their contract. So this is what I've kind of learned from talking with other people and what their departments allow and don't allow. So I wanted to talk about those 4 words, the legal definition of those 4 words, and also how fire departments are or are not utilizing it. So the 4 words that we need to talk about are hemp, cannabis, marijuana, and cannabinoids. So the first definition I wanted to talk about is cannabis. And looking at the federal definition I have pulled up here, the FDA is the only place where they actually define cannabis in the federal government, and it's part of the Cannabicae family and contains more than 80 biologically active chemical compounds. The most commonly known compounds are delta-9 THC and CBD. Right, delta-9 is what makes you feel intoxicated. It's what they test for the metabolites in a urinalysis to show whether you are taking marijuana or not. The definition goes on to say, parts of the cannabis sativa plant have been controlled under the Controlled Substances Act since 1970 under the drug class marijuana. So the DEA mentions cannabis once on the controlled substances list. I pulled that up, and it's an alias to marijuana. So the only time cannabis is defined is through the FDA, through what they described as, an alias under the Controlled Substances Act, and the DEA mentions it as an alias to marijuana. So for all intents and purposes, in the federal standard and definition of the word cannabis is marijuana, okay? So remember that. Cannabis is marijuana according to the federal government. Let's go to hemp. Hemp is defined as any cannabis sativa plant that has less than 0.3% THC by weight, right? That was brought up during the Agriculture Bill of 2018, and they redefined hemp and marijuana. From the Controlled Substances Act, they removed any cannabis sativa plant that has less than 0.3% THC. So hemp is no longer considered marijuana, aka cannabis, anymore, as long as it has less than 0.3% THC by weight. So a cannabis sativa plant could have a lot of THC in it, that'll be considered marijuana, or it could have a very low amount of THC in it, that would be considered hemp. So that's the better way to think about it is, does it have more than 0.3% THC or less than 0.3% THC by weight? Then it is or is not hemp. Hemp has low THC, marijuana has high THC. So that's a good segue into the definition of marijuana. Marijuana, defined by the federal government, is cannabis, any species that contains more than 0.3% THC by weight. And the 4th definition is cannabinoids. But there is no federal definition of what a cannabinoid is. The scientific definition of what a cannabinoid is a family of compounds found in cannabis plants. CBD and THC are the most common cannabinoids found in cannabis. Other minor cannabinoids like CBG, CBN, and CBC are also present in cannabis. Right? Cannabis as a species, not as the federal definition. So, cannabis sativa and cannabis indica are 2 different plants. They can be high THC or low THC. So CBD is just a cannabinoid. So we know the 4 definitions now that we need to talk about. And with that, you can look at your contract and determine whether you're allowed to or not allowed to use CBD based on that. We'll get into exactly why that is. Your policy could explicitly prohibit you from using hemp products. If your policy restricts you from using hemp products, then you're not allowed to take CBD because CBD is made from hemp, not marijuana. If your policy says you cannot use cannabis products, cannabis by legal definition is an alias for marijuana. So that creates kind of a gray area, even though the hemp plant is cannabis sativa, that species is the same. If they're defining it as the federal version of cannabis, which is an alias for marijuana, then that leaves a gray area where you could speak with your administration or whomever dictates the policy and say, if you're defining cannabis as the federal definition, then it's marijuana. We don't use marijuana. We use hemp. So that would be the argument. Hemp is allowed. Marijuana is not. If your policy specifically prohibits cannabinoids, again, you'd not be allowed to use CBD. CBD is a cannabinoid. So, it's very clearly defined that you're not allowed to use it, then that's the case. Now, they could say you can't use cannabinoids from marijuana. Then, obviously that's totally different. Cannabinoids from marijuana would be THC. They don't really extract CBD from marijuana. It's almost pointless. So it's most policies I've seen have not, aimed at that. They would not say you can't take cannabinoids. They would try to use the words hemp or marijuana. But they do occasionally use the word cannabis, and that kind of leads a questionable area. Are you defining cannabis as the federal definition, or are you saying all species of cannabis? So if there's no definition for them, you would go to what the law says, and the law defines cannabis as an alias to marijuana. Now, all of these things are really clearly written. The DEA is what manages and oversees and regulates drugs, prescription and otherwise. So they determine what is legal and illegal, over the counter and prescribed, right, through schedules 1 through 5. And, where CBD falls on that is nowhere. Zero. CBD is not, nor has it ever been on the Controlled Substances Act. You can look it up from when it was initially created in the 70s, and you can, track what has been added or removed. CBD was never on that. The reason CBD used to be considered illegal was because hemp was considered the same thing as marijuana. So by that definition, anything that came out of hemp was still part of the marijuana plant. CBD only comes out of hemp, but they did not distinguish the difference between CBD from hemp and CBD from marijuana. They just said CBD is from cannabis and cannabis is all illegal. So in 2018, the bill separated the two, and it very distinctly said hemp is low THC, marijuana is high THC. So on the Controlled Substances Act, the only place that cannabis is listed as an alias to marijuana. Hemp is not on the Controlled Substances Act. It's in the Department of Agriculture Farm Bill from 2018. It just regulates it as a crop, as a commodity. It can be grown anywhere in all 50 states. All of its extracts, isomers, everything you pull out of it, all the salts, all of that is considered hemp. And as long as it's less than 0.3% THC by weight, it's not considered marijuana, and it's completely legal to sell and to use in all 50 states. The only time it comes into trickiness for us as firefighters is what our contract or policy dictates. So if it says you can't use marijuana, well, this isn't from marijuana. It's completely legal to use. If it says you can't use hemp, then you can't use it, because hemp is what we make CBD from. So the terms and terminology obviously are something that your attorney should look at. Again, this is a disclaimer. I'm not giving legal advice. But, if you were trying to write a policy, these were the kinds of words that you would need to consider implementing or omitting when you're trying to talk about CBD policy. If you have no policy and you wanted to allow your members to use CBD, but still pass a drug test, the nice thing to do, or the easier thing to do that could get passed with high percentage of likelihood, is to say you cannot fail a drug test for THC. That's all you need to say, because it doesn't specifically prohibit hemp use. It by nature prohibits marijuana use. But it also, it leaves a section where you guys would have to pay attention to the CBD you're purchasing. because it doesn't specifically say you can't use CBD, but if you fail a drug test, you fail a drug test. There are tests out there that can tell the difference between you using marijuana with THC in it and you using CBD with even a small amount of THC in it. But we'll talk about that on another episode. But those tests are out there, and you can use them. Whether or not your city or fire department wants to bring that into their drug testing policy is another subject. So it's something that you would have to think about. Again, take these terms and bring them to attorneys or whomever writes your policy and say, these are the things we need to consider. So for those of you that do have policies in place already, you would have to look at those words if there's ever any kind of contest to whether you think you can or cannot take them. I would love to help in any way I can. You can always reach out to me or the team, support@rescue1CBD.com, and we'll get back to you. And you can let us know of anything that you need help with, and we'd be happy to help. It's not something that we charge for or anything like that. We're just really trying to get CBD into the fire service in any way, shape, or form. And we've helped fire departments large and small with that verbiage and any other policy that you can think of. So, again, reach out for us for anything, but specifically if you wanted that, let us know in the subject line that that's something you're looking for. Follow us on our Instagram. We give out a ton of information there, and giveaways and cool product stuff. And you could listen to this podcast on rescue1podcast.com. And obviously, if you're on the YouTube channel, please subscribe and like and share. If you guys got anything out of this, let the guys and girls of the firehouse know. Thank you. Be safe and take care of each other out there.